Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us on our NBJ Live Longevity Edition. My name is Erika Kraft. I am market research analyst for Nutrition Business Journal, joined here with my wonderful colleague, Robyn Lawrence, senior editor also on the team. And we're here this morning to just talk about one of those buzz topics right now within, our industry and within a lot of average people out there that aren't as in tune with this as we are, longevity and healthy aging. So we want to make this a fun conversation and have it be, a conversation between Robyn and I. And I think it'll be really interesting because we're going to marry, both my research from a data perspective and then also Robyn's editorial research and then have some good combo around it. So Robyn, thank you for being here with me. And I'm just going to go ahead and get right into it. So we always start these off by just showing, a couple slides on kind of laying some groundwork, on what we're talking about. And so Nutrition Business Journal, for those of you who aren't aware, we're one of the experts in tracking, trends and market sizing within the supplement industry. So that goes from what categories consumers are buying, so vitamins, minerals, down to ingredients, specific ingredients, as well as where they're buying it, so sales channels, and then how and why they're buying it. So think conditions. So we track a total of 22 conditions, and healthy aging is one of those 22. So within our condition specific report, we do, a brief market overview of the healthy aging market. But, with all of this conversation going on in the marketplace around healthy aging, longevity, biohacking, we felt like we wanted to do a deeper dive on the topic to, help brands consider what they need to do to innovate for the space, understand what consumers are looking for. And so that's what kind of started this live conversation. So we want to share some of that information that we learned with you all. And Robyn and I will just kind of talk about it. But before I get into some of the data, I wanted to kind of ask you, Robyn, on what do you think is, fueling all of this interest from a consumer perspective? Is it, those health optimizers, or is it an average consumer? What do you think?
I think it has been for a long time, health optimizers, but I think all of a sudden, even just in the last year, there have been a bunch of cultural things that have started to happen that have really started to just drive. All of a sudden, it's interesting. I feel like at Expo West, we were seeing a lot more
Totally.
conversation about this. At Newtopia, it was everywhere. And I suspect at Supply Side West, we're going to see the same thing.
Mhm.
It's just going to be the conversation is going to be revolving around longevity and health span and biohacking. I think the health span conversation has been huge in driving so much of this. So, and I think there's, first of all, America's population is aging. We have that, right? I mean, this is the biggest demographic shift that's happening right now. Um, 10,000 Americans turn 65 every day.
Oh my
So we
gosh.
have a lot of people who, just naturally are interested in making sure that their next decades are going to be healthy and happy ones. But I think we're also seeing what's so interesting to me is we're seeing a lot of interest coming, of course, Gen X is next, but millennials, especially the
Mhm.
older millennials, all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait. I'm a little bit sore after that WOD, or my hair's going. Wait, what? And so I think the millennials are driving a lot of this, and they have such an open mind and such, so I think they're the ones who are driving biohacking, which I know we'll talk about in a little bit.
Mhm.
But so there's it's coming from all generations. There's a very big kind of runway for all of this because it's not just old people who are, let's face it, going to be dying off, but it's coming from, we actually have Gen Alpha who's already thinking about keeping their skin. What
Which
can they
is
do?
insane.
Which is
Like when you say
insane,
that out loud,
right?
that's
That's,
insane. Yeah.
that's a TikTok phenom, I
Yeah.
think. And
Yeah.
but they're calling them the Sephora generation because they're already like doing multi-step programs to take care of their skin so they don't age, which now that I'm aging, I'm like, I wish I'd known that. Right? But no, so I think there's, and suddenly we've got the podcasters, we've got Andrew Huberman, we've got Peter Attia, who just wrote that, book that's become a bestseller.
Hmm.
We've got spas suddenly are calling themselves longevity centers. And we've got,
Yep.
general science, which is the biology of aging, which is becoming a really up and coming academic category. So it's happening everywhere. And so I think it's a conversation that is surrounding us.
Totally. And I think what you said on the generational piece, I know when we have like our early conversations, when we start these reports and our research is like, who are we really talking about here? Like, what's the driving force? And I think because there are so many different, aspects within each generation and what they're looking for, like you said, Gen Alpha with skin health, and millennials are looking for some sports health but a little bit of mental health, some brain health. They're kind of like more scattered all over. And then you have Gen X with a lot of weight management. So it's really interesting to see like what's driving each of it, because healthy aging, I've said this I'm sure plenty of times, but it's like another general health condition, because it's immunity, it's heart health, it's joint health, it's brain health, it's muscle health, and so it's really interesting. But so to this slide, and talking about the future of this category, I think that's where a lot of the growth is going to be coming into play. And we're going to be expecting, we estimate that growth is going to hover around the mid 7% growth rate, which is almost 2 percentage points higher than the industry overall growth. But I wouldn't be surprised if it gets higher. It's like, because we're so in it and like, oh, it's what everyone's talking about. And for sure, a lot of people are talking about it, but I still think it has so much room to grow and to reach more people. So
Yeah.
um, within that, just one other thing I want to mention in terms of like channels within this. So I think it's interesting talking about the different channel dynamics. And typically we see, from a historical perspective, this was mostly a natural and specialty condition. It was very niche and very, specific to certain ingredients. And now we're starting to see that blossom out and go into different ingredient categories, which we'll get into in a second. But a lot of this growth we're seeing is coming from DTC, so e-commerce, practitioner, your health club stores, that kind of stuff. And so I think mass market is growing more than natural and specialty, but I still think it'll be a couple years in DTC before we see a big shift into mass market. But it'll be interesting to see where it goes. But yeah, so getting into some ingredients. So this was what we published in our condition specific report. So just kind of giving you a little glimpse on what are some ingredients we're tracking within this condition. And so we can see, CoQ10, resveratrol, some of those staple category ingredients. But Robyn, I want to get your 2 cents on, what you think is going to be driving this within that big others chunk. It's like, what do you mean? That's 45% is in
Right.
others. Can you tell us more?
Which we've had this conversation, Erika.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I think there's two things to me in this others that is interesting, and one is that a lot still, when we do our consumer surveys, a lot of people are still going to the stalwarts, right? They're still like multivitamins, magnesium. They're not.
Mhm.
And then there's the other end of that spectrum where the people are just starting to discover some of the more, I don't know, what to call them, elite supplements that are part of biohacking that are really coming to fore just in the last couple of years. Things like NAD plus and all of those, which are getting a ton of conversation and a ton of publicity and are really, if you start to do your research, are always coming up as really important in this category, but don't have the market share yet for us to even be tracking them. So
Mhm.
I think we have both ends of that spectrum, and that's other is encompassing all of that.
Yeah, and I think the NAD NMN piece is really interesting. I had someone from Wall Street Journal reach out to us and ask, like what within this space like do we need to be looking at? And I think a lot of you who are watching us today probably have that same question. And so I think that, when you do these Google searches of like longevity, healthy aging supplements, they definitely come up. But
Yes.
I think that what is needed within that, and this ties back to like Peter Attia, Andrew Huberman, is like there needs to be a little more science to kind of show us like what's actually happening. I highly recommend Anyone who's listening and interested in this space to go to that podcast with Andrew Huberman and Peter Attia talking about this specifically. Super interesting. Robyn and I, it was in the beginning when we started this research that it was launched, and we're like, oh my God, did you hear it? Super fascinating, very helpful. It talks about, the history of the science behind all of these ingredients and, where it's gone, where it's coming. And so Robyn and I are not scientists. They are scientists. So if you want some more information on that, definitely go towards that. But I want to get your thoughts, Robyn, on mushrooms, because I feel like that's one thing within that others category that I feel like, and we have it on here, is we're seeing more products be launched within that. So maybe give me your two thoughts on that.
Well, and that's an interesting one because we see this like massive growth, right? It's like, wait,
Mm-hmm.
49.1% growth, but that's because, it is starting from very lower sales, right? It's
Totally.
starting from lower sales within the category of 13.5 million this year. But this is another one where there's a lot of noise around it. It's really,
Mm-hmm.
as you said, a lot of products coming out. I think, we're seeing, lion's mane is really out there as a cognitive health, which is so important in this category. We're
Right.
starting to see talk about shiitake for fighting wrinkles and reishi,
Mm-hmm.
which has always been known forever in
Mm-hmm.
traditional Chinese medicine as the mushroom of immortality. But, really what science behind it is saying, oh, it can help with inflammation. It can help with oxidative stress, which is a huge one in
Mm-hmm.
this category, right? Probably the driver of so many people's interest in it. And it can help with sleep, which is another key little piece of
Yep.
this. So I think the other again, younger generations. When we, our conservative survey saw that baby boomers are just like, whatever, no, not really, don't really see mushrooms as part of my healthy aging journey. Whereas the younger generations are like, oh no, I want more.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely believe in that and want to, learn more about it. So it's again one with a huge runway because it
Mm-hmm.
has the younger generations kind of, digging into it.
Yeah, for sure. Totally agree. Well, on that, no, we were going into some ingredients there. I want to move on to some consumer survey research that we did. And this is just kind of scratching the surface on what we got into. I mean, we asked, what are you concerned with as you age? And we mostly were talking to supplement consumers. And so, of course, you might expect to see some differences between supplement consumers and average consumers. But for us, we really wanted to capture like my theory and my assumption is that a lot of this category is going to be supplement users. So those who are already, trying to optimize their health, they're like, ooh, healthy aging. What else can I do? Like maybe of my current products that I'm taking, what could also help me within that healthy aging space? So we wanted to know, what are your most important concerns for you to maintain or manage as you age? And as we can see here, heart health and immunity topped the list there at about 28%. And so this was a select all that apply option. These were the top rated health concerns, if you will. And then weight management and mental health. I think the mental health piece is still really interesting. It was, of course, a really high growing condition in 2023. And we're seeing it also be a high growing one in 2024. But I'm curious here, Robyn, if you have any opinion on what, the mental health piece here with the aging. Is it, when you're getting older, you're just trying to manage that stress better? Is it more stress? Is it more like socializing with others? What do you think?
I think that I think that aging is hard. I think I do.
That's
I
a
just
good answer.
yeah. And I think it's funny because I think so many times we think that, well, gosh, I made it this far and everything's going to get easier now and I don't even have a job.
Right.
But there are so many factors that come in to mental health as you're aging. I mean, a lot of you lose a spouse. There's a lot of
Mhm.
ageism out there that, especially now, as people are trying to work longer, they're facing. You
Mhm.
lose income. And I think one of the biggest ones and what we see so often is you quit your job, you retire, and your purpose is gone.
Yep.
We, especially in this culture, put so much emphasis on
Mhm.
your job as your purpose, and suddenly you don't have
Mhm.
it. So depression and anxiety spike. I think, and I also think, a crazy statistic that that we put into the report is a quarter of all suicides in the United States are actually people 60 and older. So,
Really?
isn't that crazy? Like we talk so much
Yeah.
about teen suicide and, which is
Yeah, right.
pandemic, but
Of
I think,
course.
and again, because of ageism and because,
Hmm.
I think that doesn't get talked about enough. And so
Hmm.
I love to see that this is becoming really a priority for people as they age, and that it's another thing that older generations, people didn't talk about mental health. It was the stigma.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
it's really good to see that proactive action is being taken in that area.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what's interesting too is, we asked them what concerns them the most about aging. So this was like, what's important for you to maintain or manage? But then we asked, like, what is concerning you the most? And so what tops that list was loss of mobility. And
Mhm.
that ranked very high with women also. And then Alzheimer's and dementia was the second most rated one, most ranked one, also very high with women. And then loss of vision was the third highest one as well. And but what I think is really interesting about that piece, it kind of ties into this overall theme of brain health too, of
Mhm.
like that's what I think is driving that brain health category is the fear of like cognitive decline more than like the focus piece. Of course there is that there, but I think that's the main driver. And so I mean, I think that's the thing about this aging population, right? You're seeing older loved ones, whether it's in your family or have a friend that's going through it. I mean, my grandmother went through it, and my mom and I are like doing everything we can now so that we have all our ducks in a row so that it doesn't happen to us again because it's horrible. And so that's what I think the population is doing is like, what do we need to do to fix this? And so it doesn't happen. So
Yeah, I think that's
yeah,
huge, huge.
yeah.
And
So
it's just, yeah, there's 50 million people in the world who have dementia right now,
yeah.
or with dementia, and that's supposed to triple by 2050. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's terrifying
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
terrifying. So,
Yeah.
um, so yes, I think that again, the word has gotten out that you can do something, or you
Mm-hmm.
try to do everything you can to
Right.
not
Right.
put yourself and your loved ones through it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I feel like we've talked a lot about, healthy aging and longevity. I kind of want to get into this biohacking piece. And we originally weren't going to do, a chapter on this in the report or really do much research into it. But Cindy, one of our colleagues, was like, biohacking sounds like it's a really innovative space right now and that it ties into this. And, you and I were like, what, yeah, you're right. So we really looked into it more, and I'm so glad that we did because there is a lot of crossover and lay and some comparisons. And so what I think is really interesting here that ties into your piece, Robyn, of what you were saying of, it's really these younger generations that are driving this. And as you can see, millennials are more that 45% there. I had to look to my bigger screen because I still can't see the small percentage on the screen. Have the highest percent that said that they've heard of it. So we were just trying to gather awareness, and it's really interesting to see that millennials are driving this when you wouldn't think that they have a lot of aging concerns, but they do.
They do. And they're also, they're tech savvy.
Yeah.
They're, there's a viral TikTok that is basically why don't millennials age? And, I think it has like, 200 million views or
Yes.
something,
Yes.
right? Because they started thinking about it earlier, and
Uh-huh.
they're open to all these different solutions. I mean, what was fascinating to me here is that baby boomers, they were so uninterested that we couldn't even include them in our breakdowns, our
Mm-hmm.
generational breakdowns, because they were statistically insignificant.
Yep.
They're like, no,
Yep.
no, thank you.
Yep.
But so it's I kind of like mushrooms, but
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So, but it's really interesting to me that biohacking again, it's got that runway, right? Like it's really
Right.
this is the beginning. 1 in 5, whatever consumers now even know what it is. So there's
Mm-hmm.
awareness that it will happen, and again, we'll get to. So again, I don't even think we're at the bottom of the S curve. I think we're at the beginning of it.
Totally.
Mhm.
Totally. And on that, I wanted to just kind of, at least for the slides, just kind of end on this one. There's still going to be some more conversation. And if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We're monitoring those. So feel free to go ahead and put those in there. But yeah, so we asked them, what are some of so of those who said they either always, often, or sometimes, and even rarely practice biohacking as a part of their healthy regimen, like what are you doing, as a part of that regimen? What is biohacking for you? And so dietary supplements top that list. And so it's funny, when we were talking about this, I don't think of supplements as biohacking, but it is.
Yeah.
And I think of like infrared saunas, cold plunging, DNA tests, like really like out out there, really specific things for people who are really focused on this. But it's cool to see supplements come up to
Yes.
the top of the list. Did that surprise you too?
It kind of did and it kind of didn't because when you look
Yeah.
at even so let's go back and say what our definition of biohacking was because that's
Yes.
the thing we found too. There are so many. We found one website,
Totally.
a really popular website that basically put in lifestyle things like, eat well, take supplements,
Right.
where it's like,
Right.
this is just good living, right? This is, but so our definition of biohacking was that it's a form of biological self-experimentation. So things like genetic and blood tests and gene editing, and then
Mhm.
extreme nutrition and lifestyle regimens that are done to improve the quality and duration of life, but are performed outside of the conventional medical environment. So I think that's a key piece there is,
Totally. I'm so
right?
glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, so supplements are not, I mean, it's starting to happen that your traditional MD may start suggest supplements, but for a long time they've been pretty, they're outside of it. They're considered alternative, right? So,
Hmm.
so in that sense, I see them, fitting perfectly in here. And again,
Hmm.
that's, I mean, NAD plus is always at the top of biohacking lists. So
Hmm.
so I'm surprised and not surprised, but I think
Hmm.
it just spells tremendous opportunity for the supplement.
Right.
This is a whole opening up of a huge avenue.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was actually looking at another, data set that we had on this. So we asked, of these same people, like, what supplement ingredients do you believe will help you with managing your age or help you with healthy aging? Like, not necessarily are you taking them, like, what do you think will help you? What do you believe will? And the top ingredients were, of course, vitamins, multivitamins, and then also the single letter vitamins B, D, C. But then it was probiotics, omega 3s, magnesium, which normally magnesium comes up a little bit higher. So the
Yeah.
probiotics one was really interesting.
Mhm.
And then collagen, melatonin, which I thought was also interesting. I'm like, I don't know
Sleep,
about that.
sleep matters.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just such an easy thing that a lot of, general people know. It's like, oh, if I'm having problem with sleep, there's a melatonin supplement I can take. Anyway, CoQ10 and then creatine topped the list. So I loved that creatine was in there too. And yes, I am also on TikTok a lot. It is for personal, but also professional. You can learn a lot of stuff on there about this industry on TikTok. But creatine is just capturing so much press for this as well with aging. Have you seen that?
For sure, for sure. I
Yeah.
mean, I think all, there's a huge movement, and I just wrote an article for NBJ on this. There's a
Mm.
huge movement of sports, nutrition moving into the healthy aging category. Protein is
Mm-hmm.
also huge. The
Mm-hmm.
suggestions are that as you get older, you should double your protein intake, which is really
Mm.
hard, but
Really hard.
really are. But creatine not only, I mean, it makes sense, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
skeletal health are
Yep.
key to all the rest of it. Like that is what,
Mm-hmm.
and it goes back to the mobility being the most important
Mm-hmm.
concern, right? We just naturally lose muscle mass as we age. It's a thing. There's not so
Yep.
anything you can do about it. But I think the other interesting thing about creatine is the studies that are starting to come out that are showing how it helps with menopause, which is,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, an aging adjacent
Right.
category. But
Right.
it really, we're finding that, it can help with some of the brain fog. And
Mm-hmm.
it's also in that same vein, helping with brain. So,
Mm-hmm.
with cognitive health and neural protection. So
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't surprise me at all to see creatine coming, it's just, it's moved, it's so far out of the muscle head, kind of place
Yeah.
stuck in for so long. And I just and just anecdotally, all of the kind of older people I talk to, what are the supplements you're taking? Is protein and creatine are at the top of the list.
Hmm.
Protein,
Is it
creatine.
different for men versus women that you're talking to?
So many women are starting to take creatine.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think it's an interesting thing about these consumer surveys as well is how much more proactive women are being
Hmm.
within this category, how much more
Totally.
concerned they are about everything, how much more they're,
Hmm.
researching and learning and taking supplements too. I think that again is just a huge open category right now that
Yeah.
supplement brands should be jumping on.
For sure. Yeah, and I saw a question come in, asking about if we asked consumers, how they're feeling as they age and if they're taking supplements for certain things. Yes, we have more questions on that in the report in further detail. We asked them like, what are you taking supplements to help address if they said they were concerned? And so we wanted to just kind of give you an understanding of like the basis of knowledge of what people are considering when they think about aging and biohacking and whatnot. And then sharing of the definition, yes, we can do that. We can put that in the chat once we're done. But I want to kind of end on this science piece. I know I mentioned we're not scientists and we won't get too far deep in the weeds on that. But I do want to talk about like science claims and putting like clinically tested on your labels and whatnot, because I think that's happening. That conversation's happening in all categories across the industry right now. And so we've done some research, very minimal. I think we could do more to get a better understanding on like if consumers are really seeking that out. But we did it in the beginning of the year for supplements, and it didn't seem like it came to the top of the list. So, we did a list of responses for price, quality, effectiveness, science-backed ingredients, clinically researched products, that have, proof that it works. And I think like women or minority owned brands, third party certified. So we listed all of those. And the science backed and clinically researched just does not come up to the top as high as I think we would think and imagine it, but effectiveness does. And so it's like, well, so what's that gap there? Like, what do you think, Robyn, on like the misunderstanding from a consumer perspective on the science and effectiveness?
This mystifies me. It really
Yeah,
does. Like, I don't
yeah,
know if I have an answer for that because yeah, I'm it's very surprising. Although I think there's also just a perception out there that, well, of course he's been studied and
right.
they've like I think there may be just an assumption that they
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't be on the market if they didn't have
Mm-hmm.
science behind them. Um,
Yeah,
I feel like yeah, that may be where it's coming from. But just,
yeah,
it wouldn't sell this to me if it didn't have science to prove it.
yeah. Yeah, so I think I know there's a lot of concern within the industry for brands. It's expensive, to do these studies and to put them on products, and is it really worth it? And I think that's something that we're going to be looking into more, over the next year or so, because we get asked that question all the time. And so I would love to do more consumer research on that, for our supplement consumers to get a better understanding on like where the disconnect is and what do we need to do as an industry to help bridge that gap and to give more education. And so I think that's, an interesting area that we can look into. But I think we're kind of heading up on time here, and I feel like, we could keep chatting here about like what we learn. I love talking about what we learn on those podcasts. So that would be my other ending tip. If you want to learn more, I would go to that podcast. But if you're also interested in the
It's
report,
Superman Lab with Peter
yes.
is the
Yes. And Dr. Peter Attia. And Peter Attia's Outlive book is also
also
very good. My husband is
yeah,
listening to it on tape.
it's a
And
good.
it's
Sounds
funny
fun.
because yeah, he like comes to me and he's like saying all these things. He's like, well, did you know this? And I'm like, oh, that's so
That's
cool that I'm like,
great.
yes, I do know that.
Yeah.
But that's great. That's cool. So yeah, so if you're interested, in learning more about some of the research we did behind this, Robyn and I are happy to chat with you. If you want to hop on a call, please feel free to reach out. And if you're interested in the report, we can help you with that too. But we're also both going to be at Supply Side West. So if anyone's going to come to that, you're more than welcome to come up and chat with us there. But Robyn, thanks so much. This is a
Thank
lot of
you.
fun.
It is a lot of
Yeah.
fun. Great talking.
Awesome. And thank you all so much for joining, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.